Today we are making a Spanish stew called Potaje. It comes from the northern part of Spain in the province of Asturias, where my mother was born. This is her recipe. The ingredients are onions, kale, fresh kale, not frozen, cannellini beans from the can is okay, mortillas from Spain, otherwise known as blood sausages, ham, churritos, another form of sausage, Spanish sausage, potatoes, more churritos here, and in this pot we have chicken broth. Those are all going to be mixed together in one pot to make the most delicious stew you ever tasted.
We'll take our onions and we're going to dice them. This is kind of a rustic stew, so it doesn't have to be perfectly formed little pieces of onion. Probably between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch is how I'm chopping the onions.
When the chicken stock is simmering, the first ingredient we put in are the onions. And we let them simmer until they're clear.
So basically I'm just slicing these sausages, and that's the way they'll go into the stew, already pre-sliced. You're going to notice a little further down the line that we're not really going to season this stew so much, because 90% of the flavor for this stew is going to come from these 3 types of sausages. The 2 styles of chorizo and the blood sausage.
When my mother made the stew, she used smoked ham bones. Today we're using a smoked ham, which is just as delicious.
So again, this is a very rustic stew, so you don't have to worry about dicing everything exactly the same. You kind of make nice thick slices, and then I'm going to take these slices and I'm just going to cube them. And again, this is rustic style, so we're not spending hours here making perfectly formed cubes.
Now that the onions are clear, we will add the ham. And then we will add the 3 types of sausages. And we will let them simmer a while.
With the sausages and the ham introduced to our stew, we've just introduced probably 90% of the flavor of the stew. We're going to do a little bit of seasoning at the end, but this is, really where all the flavor is going to come from. And remember, all the products, the 3 types of sausages and the ham that we put in here are already cooked. So this is not a stew that requires hours and hours of cooking for the meat to break down. Everything has been cooked that we've put into this pot so far except for the onions. So probably another 5 minutes or so and we'll be ready to start introducing more of the ingredients.
Now while our onions and sausages and ham are simmering, we will prepare our potatoes and our kale.
So again, just like all our other ingredients, we're going to cube up these potatoes. Don't have to be perfectly diced again. Remember, this is a very rustic stew, so better to have a nice rustic look to our cuts. When preparing the kale, just to talk for a second about, people when you're doing these recipes, they're looking for quantities. Well, how much of that is he putting in? So I started with a gallon of chicken stock. I added a dozen or so sausages, probably about a pound of ham, and I have 6 bunches of kale. We want to remove the stems. Some people like to even go further up. I personally don't mind a little bit of the lower part of the stem, the higher part of the stem. I don't want the bottoms of the stem to get very chewy. I'm just going to remove the stems, and then I'm going to just, again, coarsely chop up this kale. It looks like an awful ton of kale because I'm going to times this by 6, but this will collapse very quickly once it hits the stock. This will be the last ingredient that we put into the stew, and you will cook it for as long as you like, depending on how much you like to cook your vegetables. Some people like them very al dente, some people like them cooked through. That's totally up to you, but this would be the last ingredient. So our stew with our ham and sausages has been cooking for about 10 minutes or so now, and a lot of the fat has been rendered out of the sausage and some of it out of the ham, which is now forming kind of a raft up on top of our stew. And this is the perfect time to skim off that fat from the top of the stew before we start adding our fresh ingredients.
The next ingredients will be our navy beans. Now, these are the beans from the can with the brine that's in the can. You can use fresh beans after you've soaked them, but the canned beans are much easier. Good for lazy people like us.
Once the potatoes are in the stew, they're really the only item or ingredient, or if you're Teresa from the Jersey Shore, it's the only one of the ingredients that are not fully cooked. So I'm going to let the potatoes cook until they're starting to get tender, not till they're fully cooked. The potatoes will also help and thicken the broth with the starch from the potatoes. But once the potatoes just start getting tender, that's when I'm going to introduce my kale. I'm probably not going to cook it more than about 10 minutes after I introduce the kale.
Now that my potatoes are getting tender, I will be putting in my kale. Looks like a lot, but it shrinks down. And now I will mix our stew with the kale. Oh, the aroma, delicious. And let that cook a little bit.
So now that we're at the final stages of cooking, like I said earlier, most of the taste is going to come from the sausage and the ham. But I do add just a little standard salt. You can use sea salt, any type of salt you prefer. Not too much because the sausages and the ham have pretty high salt content also. I like to add a little crushed table ground black pepper. And it's a pretty big pot I'm making, so you season to taste. However you like it, as much salt and pepper as you like. The one thing I do put in at the end that my grandmother never used is I like to add a little cayenne to it. Not too much cayenne, just enough for a little bit of tang, but not enough that you're going to feel heat when you eat the stew. Let's fold that in. And we're about 5 minutes away from eating.
A hearty stew needs a hearty wine. This is a Spanish wine made from the Tempranillo grapes of Spain. It is called Torre Oria, Reserve 1991. Sounds good.
Good, huh?
Yeah, very good, Richie.
Yeah?
Soup is delicious.
Tastes like grandma's?
Better. No, the soup is very good.